Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we have a YMCA in San Francisco that is feeling the consequences of allowing men into women's locker rooms and showers. And it's so bad that they have been forced to actually do something. But does that mean they have banned men from women's locker rooms? Of course not. This is San Francisco. So they've had to issue a policy that determines, how long one is able to be in a state of undress in the locker room, conduct, going from the shower to the changing area, those sort of things. And all of this because a man has been using the women's locker room for 2 years and has been exposing himself to women and little girls. No surprises there. We've all been saying this is exactly what happens when you allow men into the women's locker room. When you affirm the delusion of these men, telling them that they're women, even saying that women can have penises. Is it any wonder he thinks it's appropriate to be walking around like that, in a state of undress in front of women and children? He's been given permission to do that. But because enough women complained, there were even some police reports filed. The gym is now doing damage control and has issued these new guidelines. The Daily Mail reported this story, and the Daily Mail is being mocked relentlessly online for the way it's reporting the story. Of course, they can't just use accurate language. They have to sugarcoat it and refer to this person with she, her pronouns, number one. But the Daily Mail seems intent on refusing to acknowledge that this man was exposing his penis to the women and girls. YMCA in Liberal City finally cracks down with new rules after trans woman exposed pre-op privates in female locker room. Pre-op privates. Now, the Daily Mail actually got community noted on X because of the language that was used in what people are describing as the briefest community note of all time. It simply said, that's called a penis. So this person is named Sammy. Daily Mail's referring to this person as a trans woman with she, her pronouns. But we're talking about a man being allowed to use the women's locker room to begin with. And then what do you expect? Clearly, this man is walking around, undressing in front of women and girls, and inevitably is going to end up exposing himself. That's why we have locker rooms that are male and female to begin with. For common sense reasons, we don't need to go into it. This should be no surprise to anybody. It's been happening in locker rooms all over the country for a very long time now. And this in particular has been going on for 2 years. 2 years that the women and girls have been subjected to this. It's absolutely despicable. And these new rules, what they're doing is actually restricting the women and girls. Apparently, Sammy hasn't been seen since these new rules were implemented. So the rules state, nudity should be discreet, limited and brief. Nudity is permitted only while actively showering. Members are expected to put clothing on to be covered during use of the space outside of showering. Respect privacy and personal space. Please maintain appropriate distance from others. Be mindful of personal space during times of undress and demonstrate courtesy at all times. If men weren't allowed to use the women's locker room, this wouldn't be happening, obviously. And now all it's doing is making the women second guess themselves when they're coming out of the shower, when they're putting their clothes back on, all of these things. It's just restricting the women. In a locker room full of people who are of the same sex, people are going to be at varying degrees of comfortability. Some people are fine getting completely undressed. Other people are going to put on their clothes really quickly. Everybody's different in the way they approach using a locker room at a public gym. The locker room itself, though, is supposed to be private. There's supposed to be an element of privacy, and where that line is drawn is supposed to be biological sex. But gender identity has ruined all of that. And now these women and girls have been subjected to male genitalia in their locker room for at least 2 years. So Susan Pete, a 59-year-old member, who was one of Sammy's most vocal critics, told the Daily Mail that the new rules seemed specifically written for Sammy, who has been accused of violating each one of them. Pete said she's happy Sammy's gone, but she and many other members are wondering about a new policy that seems impractical. So what are they going to do? Having someone standing around monitoring the situation, saying you've been naked too long? He's ruined everything. And this is what these organizations do, these businesses do. They will bend over backwards, or to continue to allow men to use the women's locker room and give no thought to how it affects the women, how it impacts little girls. And they are even willing to introduce new rules that ends up restricting the women. Women don't have to worry about that when they're in a locker room with other women. This is only necessary, or this has only been implemented because of the man who has been allowed in that locker room. It's the women being punished. It's the women being restricted now, when it should have been the man who was told no. They'll much rather exclude women because, there's going to be women who turn around when they see a man in there and never come back. They're willing to exclude women from their own locker room. They're willing to restrict women, to punish women, to threaten women. That if you violate these rules, you could lose your membership. They're willing to do all of that instead of just to say, everybody uses locker rooms according to their biological sex. Instead of to take the simple solution. And yes, I know it's California state law, gender identity's in there, so, their hands are tied to a degree. But if you're going to issue new rules about conduct within the locker room, perhaps you want to start with the most obvious. A man was allowed into the women's locker room and was allowed to expose himself. All because of gender identity. Sammy would allegedly stand around naked in front of the mirror, blow drying his hair while bent over. Menacing stares would ensue as Sammy would allegedly argue back, calling people not just intolerant, but also drunk. This is outright abuse that these women have been subjected to. They should definitely file a police report, and there should be numerous lawsuits that result from this. And in the state of California, they're more concerned about the man turning around and saying that he's been singled out, he's been discriminated against, he's a woman, and they haven't respected his gender identity. They're more concerned about that, while the women are left to be subjected to abuse, hurting the man's feelings, or telling a predator, no, we're not going to give you access to women and girls. We're not going to allow you to expose yourself to women and girls. They would rather treat the women like they are the criminals, like they are the perverts, when they've done nothing wrong, but use the facilities appropriately. So there were even protesters outside at least 2 YMCAs that Sammy is known to frequent. There was the Stonestown Y, where dozens of members petitioned to force Sammy into the designated gender-neutral space. They have options that they don't want to use. All they want is to be in the women's locker room. I wonder why. And the YMCA officials defended this person's use of the women's locker room, citing civil rights. And at the Berkeley YMCA, one witness said that they saw this person harassing an elderly woman who simply asked him to cover up. Sammy allegedly said, "If you don't like the way I look, then you've got a sexual problem with yourself." And the elderly woman said, "You're a man, you don't belong here." And that's the reality of what women and children have had to deal with because of these ridiculous policies and because gender identity has been written into legislation and made biological sex meaningless. The reality is that predators have been invited into the women's locker room. The reality is that these perverts feel entitled to practice their fetish openly. It's their civil rights, apparently. While the women are told that they do not matter, that the safety of their children doesn't matter. And in the end, they will rather police the women than tell the predatory man no. So let me know what you think. Why do you think the Daily Mail used that sort of language? Why are they trying to sugarcoat the reality of this situation? So thanks for watching. A like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video. And a huge thanks to all of those who have hyped my videos. It is greatly appreciated.